The marble floor of the Galactic Diplomatic Station gleamed under the artificial lights as Ambassador Jake Morrison adjusted his tie one final time. He had done this ritual hundreds of times before, but today felt different. Today felt like the end of something important. The massive chamber stretched out before him with its curved walls reaching up toward a dome that showed the stars beyond. Those same stars that humanity had dreamed of reaching for centuries and now called home across dozens of worlds. Captain Lisa Bennett stood behind, Morrison wearing her crisp Earth Defense Fleet uniform. Her hand rested near her sidearm, not from any real threat, but from pure frustration. 3 years of the same arguments and the same dismissive looks from creatures who thought age meant wisdom. She watched the alien delegates take their positions around the semicircular table that had been designed to make humans feel small, and it was working exactly as intended. The Vorthak representative moved first. Christarch Zephyhi looked like a walking mountain of blue crystal that caught the light and threw it back in sharp angles. His voice resonated through the chamber with the sound of breaking glass when he spoke, and every word felt like a judgment. Next to him, the Etherean delegate flowed into position like a cloud of glowing gas that shifted colors based on its mood. Right now, those colors were the deep purple of annoyance mixed with the yellow of boredom. The Shathuri military commander clicked her way across the floor on 6 legs that sounded like drumsticks on metal. General Clixandra stood, nearly 8 feet tall with mandibles that could cut through steel and eyes that reflected light like black mirrors. Her species had conquered half their home galaxy before joining the council, and she never let anyone forget it. The Savani representative was the strangest of all, looking like a tree that had learned to walk with bark-covered skin and leaves that rustled when she moved. Morrison opened his briefcase and pulled out the same documents he had presented. Every month for 3 years. Population reports showing human colonies thriving on 17 worlds. Trade agreements that had brought prosperity to dozens of species. Medical advances that had saved millions of lives across the galaxy. Agricultural techniques that had ended famine on 6 different planets. Cultural exchange programs that had created the first truly universal art forms in galactic history. The numbers were impressive, and Morrison knew it. Humanity had accomplished in 50 years of space travel what most species took centuries to achieve. Human settlements were models of efficiency and cooperation. Human diplomats had resolved conflicts that had raged for decades. Human scientists had made breakthrough discoveries that advanced understanding of the universe itself. Human merchants had created trade networks that connected previously isolated worlds, but none of that mattered to the being sitting across from him, Christarch. Zephyhi resonated with the sound of contempt as he reviewed the human petition for full council membership. His crystal form shifted to a deeper blue, which meant he was about to deliver what his species considered wisdom. Morrison had learned to read these signs over the years and prepared himself for another lecture about human inadequacy. The Vorthak spoke first, as always, since their species claimed to be the oldest in the galaxy. Their crystalline cities had stood for 10,000 years, and their libraries contained the knowledge of civilizations that had turned to dust before humans discovered fire. This gave them the right to speak first in all council matters, and they used that right to remind everyone else of their superiority. Morrison listened to the familiar speech about human violence and primitive nature. The same words he had heard dozens of times before, delivered with the same tone of disappointed authority. The Etherean joined in with observations about human emotional instability and inability to think in cosmic terms. The Chitheri added comments about human military weakness and lack of proper warrior culture. The Sylvani contributed thoughts about human environmental destruction and inability to live in harmony with nature. Each criticism felt like a slap across the face, not because it was unfair, but because it was partially true. Humans did still fight wars among themselves, though less frequently than before. Human worlds did sometimes struggle with environmental problems, though they were getting better at solving them. Human emotions did run strong and sometimes cloud judgment, though they also drove the greatest achievements. Morrison had heard every argument and prepared responses for each one. He had statistics showing declining conflict rates in human space. He had environmental reports proving that human colonies were actually improving the worlds they settled. He had psychological studies demonstrating that human, emotional intelligence was actually an advantage in diplomatic situations. He had military reports showing that human forces had successfully defended dozens of worlds from various threats. None of it mattered because the Council had already made up its collective mind about humanity. The breaking point came when the G3 delegate suggested that humans should feel grateful for being allowed to colonize only 3 systems in Council space. Her mandibles clicked with amusement as she explained that most young species were restricted to their home system for their first century of space travel. Humanity had been given exceptional privileges and should appreciate the generosity of their betters. Morrison felt something snap inside his chest like a wire pulled too tight. 3 systems out of the millions available in the galaxy. 3 small worlds where humans could build their dreams, while staying safely away from the important business of galactic civilization. 3 tiny corners where humanity could play at, being spacefaring while the real powers decided the future of countless worlds. He thought about the human colonies thriving in those 3 systems. New California with its vast agricultural projects that fed hungry populations across a dozen worlds. New Geneva with its research facilities that had developed cures for diseases that had plagued alien species for centuries. New Tokyo with its manufacturing centers that produced everything from starship components to works of art that had become treasures in museums across the galaxy. 3 systems that had become beacons of hope for species that had been ignored or oppressed by the Council for generations. 3 systems that had shown what was possible when beings worked together instead of arguing about who was superior to whom. 3 systems that had proven human worth through actions rather than ancient bloodlines or superior technology. Morrison stood up slowly, and every eye in the chamber turned toward him. The silence stretched out like a held breath as he closed his briefcase with a sharp click that echoed off the marble walls. The sound seemed to wake everyone from a trance, and he could see confusion beginning to replace the usual boredom on alien faces. He turned to Captain Bennett and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear him clearly. The words came out calm and steady despite the fire burning in his chest and the urge to say everything he really thought about beings who confused age with wisdom and tradition with truth. The Council representatives barely reacted to his departure announcement. They had seen young species throw tantrums before when their demands were rejected. Humans would calm down and return within a few months ready to accept whatever scraps the Council was willing to offer. It always happened that way with primitive civilizations that overestimated their own importance. Morrison walked toward the exit with Bennett beside him and their small staff following behind. None of them looked back at the chamber where 5 of the most powerful beings in the galaxy sat discussing human immaturity and the need for patience with developing species. The conversation had already moved on to other business, as if the human petition had never existed at all. But as the humans left the station and headed back to their ships, something changed in the galaxy that none of the Council members noticed. For the first time in 3 years, no human request for aid or recognition would arrive next month. No human trade proposals would cross Council desks. No human scientific papers would be submitted to galactic conferences. The age of humanity asking for permission was over, and the age of humanity doing whatever it wanted was about to begin. 6 months passed like the quiet before a storm, and the Galactic Council began to notice something was wrong. The first sign came when the monthly human trade reports failed to arrive at the Council headquarters. The second sign was the complete silence from human colonies when the Council tried to contact them about routine diplomatic matters. The third sign was the most troubling of all because it meant the humans were not just ignoring the Council, but actively avoiding them. Dr. Rachel Martinez stood in her laboratory on Mars looking at the red landscape through reinforced windows that protected her from the thin atmosphere outside. Her desk was covered with research papers and computer displays showing breakthrough discoveries in xenobiology that would have made her famous across the galaxy just 7 months ago. Now she deleted each alien message without reading it and focused her brilliant mind on projects that would benefit humanity alone. The messages kept coming anyway because her former colleagues could not understand why she had stopped responding. The Etherean scientist who had worked with her on protein synthesis wanted to continue their joint research. The Chithari biologist, who had shared data about insect-based ecosystems, kept sending increasingly desperate requests for collaboration. The Silvani botanist, who had taught her about plant consciousness, begged her to reconsider their friendship. Rachel felt a stab of pain each time she deleted another message because these beings had been more than colleagues to her. They had been friends who shared the excitement of discovery and the joy of understanding how life worked across different worlds. But friendship meant nothing when their governments treated humans like children who needed permission to exist in the galaxy. She turned back to her work on genetic adaptation, techniques that would help human colonists survive on worlds with hostile environments. The research was moving faster than ever before because human scientists no longer had to share their discoveries with beings who would use that knowledge while denying humans equal status. Competition had always driven human innovation, and now they were competing against the entire galaxy. Meanwhile, in the Outer Rim territories, something unprecedented was happening that the Council intelligence services were only beginning to understand. Admiral Tom Bradley commanded the largest human fleet ever assembled as it prepared for the most ambitious exploration mission in human history. 50 ships loaded with colonists and supplies were ready to launch toward systems that no galactic power had ever claimed or explored. The Council had always restricted human expansion by limiting them to 3 systems in Council space where their activities could be monitored and controlled. But beyond Council territory lay thousands of unclaimed systems that offered unlimited possibilities for a species willing to take risks and work hard. Human scout ships had already identified 17 worlds perfect for colonization and dozens more that could support human settlements with minimal terraforming. Bradley reviewed the fleet manifest one final time before giving the launch order that would change the balance of power in the galaxy. Each ship carried not just colonists, but also the knowledge and technology that humanity had developed during their years of trying to impress the Council. Agricultural techniques that could turn barren worlds into gardens. Medical advances that could cure diseases affecting dozens of species. Engineering solutions that could build cities in environments that other species considered uninhabitable. The launch went smoothly because humans had learned to be self-sufficient during their years of limited Council support. Human shipyards built vessels that were more efficient than anything in the Council fleet. Human training programs produced crews that could handle any crisis in deep space. Human logistics networks could supply colonies across dozens of light years without depending on alien trade routes. On the Galactic Diplomatic Station, Counselor Prime Veltar reviewed intelligence reports that made her bark-covered skin darken with worry. The quarterly analysis showed patterns that no Council member had anticipated when they dismissed the human petition 6 months earlier. Minor species throughout Council space were beginning to ask questions about why humans had been treated so poorly and whether the Council truly represented their interests. The Corellian Trade Union had sent 3 diplomatic messages asking about establishing direct contact with human colonies. The Dracomari Republic wanted to know if humans would be willing to mediate a border dispute that the Council had been ignoring for 15 years. The Nexus Collective was offering mining rights to human companies because human miners were more efficient and honest than the Council-approved corporations that had been cheating them for decades. Each report painted the same picture of growing dissatisfaction with Council leadership and increasing interest in human alternatives. Species that had never questioned Council authority were suddenly comparing human achievements to Council promises and finding the promises lacking. The humans had not actively recruited these species or made any hostile moves against Council interests, but their mere existence as a successful alternative was causing problems. General Clixandra dismissed these concerns during a closed military briefing with typical Chithuri arrogance. Her mandibles clicked with amusement as she explained that primitive species often became confused when faced with rapid changes in galactic politics. The humans would eventually encounter real dangers in unexplored space and come crawling back to the Council for protection. Just like every other young species that had tried to go it alone but classified, military reports told a different story that contradicted the general's confident predictions. Human fleets had encountered Void Hunter raiding parties 3 times in the past month and emerged victorious from each engagement. The Void Hunters were savage creatures that lived in dark space between systems and attacked any ships they encountered. Most species avoided their territory completely or traveled in heavily armed convoys. When passage was absolutely necessary, the humans had not only fought the Void Hunters but defeated them using tactics that Council military analysts could not understand. Videos of the battles showed human ships working together with a coordination that seemed impossible without telepathic communication. Human weapons fired with precision that suggested targeting systems far more advanced than anything the Council possessed. Human crews performed maneuvers that should have been fatal, but somehow worked perfectly. More troubling than the military victories were the aftermath reports, showing how humans treated captured Void Hunters. Instead of executing them as savage beasts, the humans had established detention facilities where they studied Void Hunter biology and psychology. Early results suggested that the creatures were not naturally violent but had been driven to raiding by environmental changes in their home regions. This information could revolutionize understanding of one of the galaxy's greatest threats, but the humans were not sharing their discoveries with the Council. They were keeping their knowledge to themselves and using it to build better defenses, while other species continued to suffer from Void Hunter attacks. The most alarming development came from border systems where Council authority had always been weak but unchallenged. The Zephyrian colonial worlds had quietly established direct diplomatic relations with human settlements and were reporting improvements in trade, efficiency, and dispute resolution that made Council services look incompetent by comparison. The humans were not actively recruiting these worlds, but they did not need to because their reputation for fairness and competence was spreading through underground channels. Veltar realized that the Council faced a crisis unlike anything in its 3,000-year history. They had created their own competition by rejecting the one species that might have strengthened their organization from within. Now that species was proving that Council membership was not necessary for success in galactic civilization, and other species were beginning to notice. The humans had not declared war or made threatening gestures toward Council space. They had simply stopped participating in Council activities and focused on building something better. Their success was making the Council look weak and irrelevant. At a time when galactic civilization needed strong leadership to face growing threats from unknown regions of space. The worst part was that the humans were doing exactly what they had always said they wanted to do. They were exploring new worlds and building peaceful colonies and helping other species solve their problems. The only difference was that they were doing it without Council permission or oversight, and proving that such permission had never been necessary in the first place. The crisis hit the Galactic Council like a meteor striking a planet when the Corellian Trade Union announced their complete withdrawal from all Council economic agreements. The Corellians controlled 40 star systems and their trade networks, connected hundreds of worlds across 3 galaxy sectors. Their decision to abandon Council partnerships in favor of direct human cooperation sent shockwaves through every government building on every Council world. Prime Councilor Cathmoran floated in the emergency session chamber as his ethereal form flickered between colors that showed his growing panic. The ancient Etherian had lived for over 2,000 years and served on the Council for 8 centuries but had never faced a crisis like this one. Around him, the representatives of 12 major species gathered in their designated positions, while emergency holographic displays showed the scope of the disaster they were facing. The numbers were terrifying in their simplicity. 3 more major species had formally requested diplomatic relations with Earth in the past week alone. The Drakmari Republic wanted to join what they called the Human Defense Alliance after seeing how effectively human fleets had handled Void Hunter attacks. The Nexus Collective was offering exclusive mining rights to human corporations because they trusted human business practices more than council-approved companies that had been cheating them for decades. Back on Earth, President Karen Williams sat in the Oval Office reviewing intelligence reports that would have seemed impossible just 2 years earlier. Her Secretary of State Ryan Parker spread holographic displays across the room showing the rapid expansion of human influence across the galaxy. Each display told the same story of species choosing human partnership over council membership, because humans offered something the ancient powers had forgotten how to provide. Williams remembered the years of humiliation when human ambassadors had begged for recognition from beings who treated them like primitive children. She remembered the condescending speeches about human violence and emotional instability from species whose own histories were filled with wars and genocide. She remembered the dismissive gestures when humans offered to share medical advances and agricultural techniques that could save millions of lives across the galaxy. Now those same species were facing the consequences of their arrogance as their own member worlds chose human alternatives over council services. The irony was not lost on anyone in the Earth government that the Council had created its own replacement by forcing humanity to become independent. By rejecting human partnership, they had accidentally created human competition that was proving far more attractive to species throughout the galaxy. Defense Secretary Alex Chun activated a three-dimensional map showing human space as it existed now compared to 6 months earlier. The growth was stunning in its speed and scope. Human colonies now existed in 31 star systems outside Council territory, and each settlement was thriving beyond all expectations. The Void Hunter attacks that were supposed to drive humans back to Council protection had instead accelerated human military development and created defensive technologies that made human space the safest region in the galaxy. The expansion had not come through conquest or coercion, but through simple attraction. Species that had been ignored or oppressed by the Council for generations discovered that humans would treat them as equals regardless of their age or technological development. Human colonies welcomed refugees from failed Council worlds and gave them opportunities to rebuild their lives in societies that valued contribution over bloodline. Chen highlighted the most significant development in the intelligence reports, which showed that human settlements had become centers of innovation that were advancing faster than anything seen in galactic history. When species worked together without the restrictions imposed by Council traditions, they created solutions to problems that had seemed impossible. Human medical research combined with alien biology produced cures for diseases that had plagued civilizations for millennia. Human engineering mixed with alien materials. Science created technologies that surpassed anything the Council possessed. The transformation was visible in every corner of human space, where cities rose from barren worlds in months rather than decades. Human agricultural techniques turned hostile environments into gardens that could feed millions. Human manufacturing created goods that were superior in quality and lower in cost than anything produced in Council space. Human transportation networks connected distant worlds with efficiency that made Council trade routes look primitive. On the Rim worlds, something unprecedented was happening that sent Council intelligence agencies into full panic mode. The Zephyrian Confederacy, which had been a founding member of the Council 3,000 years earlier, was publicly questioning whether the organization served any useful purpose in modern galactic civilization. Their ambassador, Thekvar, delivered a speech that was broadcast across Council space and watched by billions of beings who had never heard anyone challenge Council authority so directly. Thekvar stood before the Zephyrian Planetary Assembly and spoke words that would be remembered as the beginning of the end for the old galactic order. He reminded his audience that they had joined the Council to ensure peace and prosperity for all species, but instead had watched the most dynamic civilization in centuries be driven away by Council arrogance and stupidity. He asked whether an organization that could not recognize obvious talent and chose ancient prejudice over practical cooperation deserved to continue existing. The speech resonated across the galaxy because it voiced doubts that many species had been feeling but were afraid to express. Council membership had once been a mark of prestige that brought protection and prosperity to member worlds. Now it seemed like a burden that prevented species from pursuing better opportunities with human partners who offered real cooperation. Instead of empty promises, the Council's response to the crisis was predictably ineffective, because the organization had grown too comfortable with unchallenged authority to adapt quickly to changing circumstances. Emergency sessions produced nothing but speeches about the importance of galactic unity and the dangers of abandoning proven systems for untested experiments. The same beings who had dismissed human contributions as inadequate now complained that human success was disrupting galactic stability. HFY attempted to restore confidence in Council leadership by organizing a military demonstration, designed to show that Council forces remained superior to human fleets. The exercise backfired spectacularly when intelligence reports revealed that human observers had easily detected all Council ship movements and could have destroyed the entire fleet if they had chosen to do so. The humans made no hostile moves, but their passive scanning of the exercise revealed technological capabilities that far exceeded anything the Council possessed. The demonstration that was supposed to show Council strength instead revealed Council weakness to every intelligence. Service in the galaxy. Human defensive systems could track ships at ranges that made surprise attacks impossible. Human weapons could penetrate shields that were supposed to be impenetrable. Human tactics were so advanced that Council military analysts could not understand how they worked. More disturbing than human military superiority was human restraint in using their advantages. They could have conquered Council space easily, but chose instead to focus on exploration and colonization of unclaimed territories. They could have retaliated for years of insults and discrimination, but instead offered friendship to any species, willing to treat them as equals. They could have demanded tribute from species seeking their protection, but instead provided aid freely to any world that requested help. This combination of strength and benevolence created exactly the kind of leadership that the galaxy desperately needed, but the Council had failed to provide. Species throughout known space began to ask themselves why they should remain loyal to an organization that had grown corrupt and complacent when they could join a civilization that was dynamic and fair. The tipping point came when casualty reports from the latest Void Hunter attacks showed that worlds under human protection had suffered 0 losses, while Council territories continued to lose ships and colonies to the savage raiders. The humans had not only solved the Void Hunter problem, but had done so without sharing their methods with the Council that had rejected their offers of cooperation. The galaxy was changing faster than anyone had anticipated, and the Council was being left behind by their own choice. 2 years after Ambassador Jake Morrison walked out of the Council chambers, the unthinkable happened when a formal delegation of Council representatives requested permission to visit Earth. The request came through diplomatic channels that had been silent for so long that human officials initially thought it was a mistake or possibly some kind of elaborate joke. But the authentication codes were genuine, and the list of delegates included some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. HFY stood in the shuttle bay of Luna Station feeling more uncomfortable than he had ever felt in his 3,000-year lifespan. The Vorthic representative who had once dismissed humanity as primitive children now found himself in the position of a supplicant seeking audience with the species he had rejected. His crystalline form reflected the lights of human technology that had advanced far beyond anything the Council possessed, and each reflection reminded him of how badly he had misjudged these remarkable beings. The station itself was a testament to human achievement that made Council facilities look ancient and inefficient by comparison. Beings from dozens of species moved through corridors that buzzed with activity as trade negotiations and diplomatic meetings took place in multiple sectors simultaneously. The humans who managed this complex operation moved with quiet confidence that came from knowing they had built something unprecedented in galactic history. Ambassador Susan Clark walked through the corridors of Luna Station, reviewing the intelligence briefings that prepared her for the most important meeting in human diplomatic history. The woman who now served as Earth's Director of Galactic Affairs had been a junior diplomat 2 years earlier when the council had treated human representatives like annoying children. Now she was about to meet with beings who had once considered themselves humanity's superiors, and the reversal of roles was both satisfying and sobering. Clark entered the main conference room overlooking Earth and took her position at the head of a table designed to accommodate representatives from multiple species. Through the massive windows behind her, the blue planet showed signs of the transformation that had taken place since humanity stopped asking for council permission to exist. Orbital elevators reached into space like silver threads connecting the surface to shipyards that produced vessels superior to anything in the council fleet. Prime Counselor Kethmoran entered the room first with his ethereal form, flickering between colors that showed his nervous uncertainty. The ancient Etherian who had lived for millennia and ruled over countless worlds now faced the humbling experience of negotiating from weakness with a species he had once dismissed as irrelevant. His gaseous body shifted to colors that indicated deep regret mixed with desperate hope. General Clixandra followed with her 6 legs, clicking against the floor in a rhythm that betrayed her anxiety despite her attempts to maintain military bearing. The Chitheri warrior who had once mocked human military capabilities now commanded forces that were clearly inferior to human fleets in every measurable category. Her mandibles clicked softly as she took her position at the table and avoided making direct eye contact with the human officials. The delegation included representatives from every major council species, and each one carried the weight of civilizations that were facing collapse because they had chosen ancient prejudice over practical cooperation. They had come to Earth not as conquerors or even equals, but as beings who desperately needed what humanity had built and could no longer deny their mistakes. Clark began the meeting with words that were polite, but firm in establishing the new reality of galactic politics. She welcomed the delegates to human space and expressed hope that productive discussions could take place between civilizations that respected each other as equals. The emphasis on equality was deliberate because it reminded everyone present that the days of council superiority were over. Prime Counselor Kethmoran attempted to open negotiations by referring to the historical relationship between the council and humanity, but Clark interrupted him gently but decisively. She explained that any discussions would need to focus on current realities rather than past arrangements that had proven unsatisfactory to both sides. The old relationship where humans begged for recognition was dead, and any new relationship would need to be built on mutual respect and genuine partnership. The council delegation had prepared for various scenarios, but they had not prepared for the complete role reversal they now faced. They had expected to find humans who were struggling with independence and ready to return to council oversight in exchange for protection and support. Instead, they found a civilization that had flourished in isolation and attracted the loyalty of species throughout the galaxy. General Clixandra made an attempt to reassert council authority by mentioning that the organization still represented the majority of galactic civilization and suggesting that humanity should recognize the benefits of rejoining the established order. Her words fell flat in the face of holographic displays that showed the current state of galactic politics, where human influence extended across more systems than council authority. The displays were devastating in their clarity because they showed exactly how much the balance of power had shifted in just 2 years. Human space now encompassed over 50 star systems with active colonies that were thriving beyond all expectations. Human trade networks connected hundreds of worlds that had never been part of council commerce. Human defensive alliances protected species that had suffered under council neglect for centuries. More importantly, the displays showed that human expansion had come through attraction rather than conquest. Every world that had joined the human sphere had done so voluntarily because they preferred human cooperation to council domination. Every species that had chosen human partnership over council membership had seen improvements in their quality of life that made the benefits of the old system look pathetic by comparison. The meeting stretched for hours as the delegation gradually understood the scope of their miscalculation and the impossibility of returning to the old arrangements. Humanity did not need the Council for protection because human fleets were superior to anything the Council possessed. Humanity did not need Council trade networks because human commerce was more efficient and profitable for all participants. Humanity did not need Council recognition because dozens of species had already chosen to recognize human leadership. Clark presented the current situation with calm professionalism that made the desperate position of the Council delegation even more obvious. Human colonies were expanding at a rate of 3 new settlements per month. Human technology was advancing faster than anything seen in galactic history. Human diplomacy was resolving conflicts that the Council had been unable to address for decades. The most humbling moment came when Christarch Zephahai asked about the possibility of Council species receiving human protection from Void Hunter attacks. The crystalline being who had once lectured humans about their primitive nature was now asking for help from the species he had rejected. Clark's response was measured and diplomatic, but the underlying message was clear that humans would provide aid to any species that requested it regardless of past relationships. The formal negotiations would continue for days, but the essential outcome was already determined by the realities of galactic politics that no amount of diplomatic language could change. The Council needed humanity far more than humanity needed the Council, and everyone in the room understood that fact, even if some were reluctant to admit it openly. The age of Council supremacy was ending, and the age of human leadership was beginning. Whether the old powers accepted it gracefully or continued to resist the inevitable changes that were reshaping galactic civilization. The delegation had come to Earth hoping to restore their authority, but instead found themselves witnessing the birth of a new galactic order that would be built on human principles of cooperation and equality rather than Council traditions of hierarchy and dominance. The final confrontation took place not in the marble halls of the old Council chambers, but in the gleaming conference center of Frontier Station, where representatives from over 100 species gathered to witness the birth of a new galactic order. The massive space station floated at the edge of known space, like a beacon of hope for civilizations that had grown tired of ancient prejudices and outdated systems that no longer served their needs. President Karen Williams stood before the largest assembly of galactic leaders in recorded history and felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her shoulders like gravity from a massive planet. Her words would be carried across the galaxy by quantum communication networks and heard by billions of beings who were watching to see whether the promises of human leadership could match the reality of human achievement. The human proposal was revolutionary in its simplicity and fairness because it rejected the hierarchical systems that had dominated galactic politics for thousands of years. The new galactic commonwealth would be based on contribution rather than age and participation, rather than tradition. Every species from the ancient Etherians to newly spacefaring civilizations would have equal voice in decisions that affected their worlds and equal opportunity to benefit from galactic cooperation. Williams explained that the Commonwealth would operate on principles that humans had learned through centuries of struggle and growth on their homeworld. Democracy rather than aristocracy would guide decision-making processes. Merit rather than bloodline would determine leadership positions. Cooperation rather than domination would shape relationships between different species and civilizations. The proposal attracted support from species throughout the galaxy because it offered something the Council had never provided, which was genuine partnership based on mutual respect. Small civilizations that had been ignored by Council bureaucracies saw opportunities to have their voices heard in Commonwealth assemblies. Oppressed populations that had suffered under Council-backed dictatorships saw chances to build better societies with human support and guidance. Prime Counselor Cathmoran made one final attempt to preserve the old system that had given his species authority over countless worlds for millennia. His ethereal form flickered with colors that showed desperation mixed with fading hope as he reminded the assembly that the Council had maintained peace for 3,000 years. He argued that abandoning proven systems for untested ideals would bring chaos and suffering to civilizations that had thrived under Council protection. Admiral Tom Bradley responded to the Ethereans' plea with quiet authority that came from commanding the most powerful fleet in galactic history. The human officer who had once served under Council restrictions now led forces that could protect or destroy any civilization in known space. His response was gentle but firm as he explained that Council systems had failed the moment they decided. Some species were more worthy of respect than others. Bradley reminded the Assembly that true peace came from justice, rather than force and cooperation rather than submission. The Council had maintained order through threat and intimidation, while humans offered partnership through mutual benefit and shared prosperity. The choice between these approaches was clear to any species that valued freedom over security and growth over stagnation. The vote that followed was not even close because the benefits of human leadership had become obvious to the civilizations throughout the galaxy. 87 species formally withdrew from the Galactic Council to join the new Commonwealth in a decision that represented the largest political transformation in galactic history. Even some of the original Council founders led by the Zephyrian Confederacy chose human vision over their ancient institution. The ceremony that followed took place in the main Assembly Hall of New Geneva Station, where representatives from across the galaxy gathered to witness the installation of the first Commonwealth government. The station itself was a symbol of the new era because it had been built through cooperation between humans and dozens of alien species working together as equals rather than masters and servants. Ambassador Jake Morrison walked slowly toward the podium where he would take his oath as the first Secretary General of the Galactic Commonwealth. The man who had walked out of Council chambers 3 years earlier now carried the hopes and dreams of civilizations that had chosen human leadership over Council authority. His journey from rejected diplomat to galactic leader represented the ultimate vindication of human worth and potential. Morrison placed his hand on a crystal tablet that contained the Commonwealth Charter written in the languages of every member species and began the oath that would formally establish the new galactic government. His words were simple and direct because the Commonwealth was built on principles that any being could understand regardless of their species or technological development. The oath committed him to serve all member species equally and to uphold the principles of democracy and cooperation that had made human civilization attractive to beings throughout the galaxy. He promised to protect the weak and support the strong while ensuring that every voice would be heard in Commonwealth deliberations. He pledged to defend the freedom and dignity of all sentient beings regardless of their origin or appearance. As Morrison spoke the words that would change galactic civilization forever, he reflected on the journey that had brought humanity to this moment. They had not conquered the galaxy through military force or economic manipulation, but had attracted followers through the simple expedient of treating other beings with respect and fairness. The species that once dismissed humans as primitive children now looked to them for leadership, because humans had proven their worth through actions rather than words. The Commonwealth faced enormous challenges in the years ahead because building a new galactic civilization would require solving problems that had plagued the galaxy for millennia. Void hunter attacks continued to threaten rim worlds and would need to be addressed through military cooperation between multiple species. Economic inequality between advanced and developing civilizations would need to be reduced through technology, sharing, and development assistance. Environmental destruction on hundreds of worlds would need to be reversed through scientific cooperation and resource management. But for the first time in galactic history, these challenges would be addressed by a government that represented the interests of all member species rather than the prejudices of ancient powers. The Commonwealth would succeed or fail based on its ability to deliver results rather than its ability to maintain traditional authority structures that no longer served any useful purpose. The old Galactic Council still existed in the empty chambers, where a handful of species clung to a fading authority while the rest of the galaxy moved forward under human guidance. The crystalline halls that had once echoed with speeches about human inadequacy now stood as monuments to the danger of underestimating those who dared to dream of something better than what had always been. Morrison concluded his oath with words that would be remembered as the founding principles of the new galactic order. He promised that the Commonwealth would judge species by their contributions rather than their age and would offer partnership to any civilization willing to work for the common good. He declared that the age of hierarchy and dominance was over, and the age of cooperation and equality had begun. The ceremony ended with representatives from across the galaxy pledging their loyalty to the Commonwealth and their commitment to building a better future for all sentient beings. The humans who had once begged for recognition now led a civilization that spanned most of known space and offered hope to species that had never known true freedom or genuine partnership. The galaxy would never be the same because humanity had proven that ancient prejudices could be overcome and that cooperation was stronger than domination. The Council had thought they needed humans to stay in their place, but instead humans had shown them that they needed to get out of the way.